So we just saw the Odyssey, and before I really get going, I would like to make a caveat that I'm not really going to try and focus on giving or not giving any spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie and you really don't want a shred of it spoiled for you, I just don't recommend you watch this video altogether. That being said, going to see the Odyssey, first and foremost, we went to a 10 a.m. showing in IMAX, not the cool 70mm, but just the normal, boring laser IMAX over here at our Hooksett Theater, and it was packed. A 10 a.m. showing was packed. I stood in line for the bathroom at the movies for the first time since probably middle school or maybe early high school, which was super exciting just to see another movie that was an event. The last time I saw something like this was maybe Oppenheimer and Barbie, that sort of Barbieheimer era. Anyways, this is another Nolan film that ended up being a huge kind of blockbuster. The fervor of the nation has been caught up in it in terms of a cinematic movie, which is really cool to see. Now, the movie itself. This is a fantastic movie. I mean, it is a 9 out of 10 easy, possibly a 10 out of 10. I'd have to watch it and give it some more thought, but an instant kind of Criterion collection. You're viewing a movie that is going to be cemented into cinema history for the rest of forever. You know the story. It is a fantastic telling of one of, maybe history's most important literature stories, the Odyssey by Homer, or let me say attributed to Homer to be specific, but massive cast, fantastic performances. It's hard for me, I got to think about it to kind of like boil it down. I'd say, coming off of, there's been a lot of talk about seeing it in IMAX, and my first sort of like impression is that I do recommend you see it in IMAX, but having seen it on this giant screen, I don't know that that's so much important for the visuals, for like the crop or anything like that, but the powerful sound system, I think, is worth the experience. It is worth that extra ticket cost because the sound design of this movie is incredibly powerful. I think it's incredibly well done. It is intense. It almost feels a lot of times like you're on a ride. Just because it's like being at a concert or something. It's just extremely dramatic, extremely epic, and it greatly complements the movie. I think this movie could have been a lot less good, frankly, had the sound not been so powerful, and you can definitely tell there's a lot of thought that went into it. Just to talk about some of my key takeaways, because there's a lot that you could potentially talk about this movie. There's a million YouTube breakdowns of it. And without going into the weeds, I'll just tell you some of my great takeaways. I think some of the biggest things that I was really blown away by in terms of the movie is, in fact, the scale and the scope of its production. This is a movie that, again, was all shot with an IMAX camera, which is the 70mm film, which is a 70mm camera is extremely loud. The gate on that is really big, and for it to move at that proper speed, it produces a tremendous amount of noise. So they encased the camera in a big soundproof box, and because it was so wide, in order to get the eye lines right, they had to set up a mirror system so that they were actually looking in each other's faces through a mirror, and they had to look like right at the camera in order to look slightly off, because the camera was so wide they couldn't see through the camera, so they had to use a mirror system to do that. So those two things alone are really difficult, I would imagine, to work around for such a big budgeted movie. So much of this movie was shot in water. It seems like there was a lot of it was shot practically on an actual body of water. There was definitely a decent amount that you could tell was like a soundstage, but they're still spraying tons of water. And there's so much coverage. When you think about 70mm, film is extremely expensive. It's unlike digital. Every second that you're rolling is costing you a significant amount of money, and the bigger the film, the more expensive that every one of those seconds is. And so to see a lot of coverage, and what I mean by that is every action had to be filmed multiple times from multiple angles. And this movie has so much action in it that you're having to repeat those takes thousands of times. You want to do maybe 5 takes from one angle, 10 takes from another angle, 15 takes from another. I mean, the sky's the limit. Who knows how many takes they did of each particular scene. So when you're thinking about how much coverage there is, I'm sitting there thinking, this is such an expensive movie. The other aspect, one of the things that I, was watching and I have these moments sometimes where I'm like, man, I wish I could have shadowed this person. Usually it's for editing or whatever, but for this movie, I really wish I could have shadowed the gaffer or the lighting team, because you can tell that in the cinematography or in the photography, they are taking advantage of the fact that they know this is a very large format picture, a very large format movie. They're trying to really take advantage of the fact that it's on an IMAX, that it's on that full 70 millimeter film. So a lot of the shots are really wide and grand and epic, and that is super important to the feeling and the theme of the movie, of this grand epic adventure, these huge scapes of land, beautiful landscape photography in this movie. But even a lot of times when they're just setting it up and they're showing all the soldiers, these big, epically wide shots of these enclosed rooms, the lighting is so beautiful. And when you're shooting really, really wide, the wider your shot, the harder it is to light, because you have more space that you can't put lighting source materials in, or light sources in. And then on top of that, it's a movie that is lit all natural lighting. Like in terms of the in-universe, there's no practical lights. Everything, well, I guess technically it's all practical lighting, but there's no electricity, there's no hard sources, so everything has to be extremely ambient, and it's all fire, so a lot of it has to be flickery. And so to light a really big, wide shot like that so beautifully with very limited of where you can put a pole in a light. Now I know with digital eras they can remove a lot of stuff, but it still is just something that I was thinking through a lot of the movie, a lot of the shots, a lot of the scenes. I'm thinking, man, how they lit this is so much thought. I mean, so much pre-production had to go into looking at the storyboard and the lighting team getting together and really working with the cinematographer to figure out how are we going to pull off, to light this correctly. Because unlike in a lot of movies where you have a scene that has, you can say, oh, well, it's sourcey, and so we're going to put a light here, it's really bright, and it lights the character because there's a street lamp there. Well, in this, all the light is very eye level, because it's torches on a wall, or maybe you have like a torch chandelier or a lantern or something like that, but it all has to be really ambiently lit. And because a lot of the scenes are fire on a torch or a lantern, you have to really pay attention to the continuity of where that lighting source is moving. So if a character is holding the light and that's moving in the space, your shot and the timing of where that moves, now that light is going to look differently on that person's face. And so if you were to go back and watch the movie and really think about that while you're watching some of these scenes, and then again, taking into consideration how large and wide some of these shots are, because they're really trying to take advantage of the fact that it's this big format, and there's a lot of big, large, beautiful compositions in it. It's just really, really impressive piece of filmmaking. The cinematography is really, really nice. There is a lot of it feels like the movie is either very big and grand in its composition or very tight and claustrophobic and chaotic. And I think that is just the sort of juxtaposition of distance and then battle and chaos and adventure. The editing is where I'm going to have a little bit of a critical note here. And it's funny because I distinctly remember my criticism being extremely similar for Oppenheimer. The Odyssey is a difficult story. I have never read it, but I can acknowledge that it is a very difficult story to tell because it is... there's a lot of different ways that you could go about telling this sort of story being told as a story. And so in the very beginning of the movie, they're playing with timelines, sort of like parallel stories that are being told. So you're jumping around chronologically a lot, and you're telling that chronological story from different character perspectives. And they do a lot of that in the beginning, and they're trying to set up a lot of things really quickly. So the pacing of the edit feels like a little bit like you're kind of being rocked over here, rocked over there. And then they start really covering the bulk of the journey, and it feels super, super compressed while also trying to give these big weighted moments to these important parts. So I'm not giving anything away here, but the Cyclops, let's just say as an example, you're going from enemy, they're meeting these various enemies. So it's like enemy, Cyclops, and now we're slowing down in this big moment. Okay, that's over. Now let's move to the next thing. Okay, we're slowing it down. And okay, now we got to move to the next thing. And so they had to cover all these things, but each one of them is so iconic to the story that they had to kind of like get there and then stretch it way out and build the tension and build the moment and build the anticipation and the impact and the climax and the action. And then, okay, we got to go back. Get over here. Okay, we're over here. Now let's pull it back out. Now we're at this part. So it was extremely start and stop jerky in terms of its pacing. And like I said, I distinctly remember that being the exact criticism that I had with Oppenheimer. And it could be an artistic choice. As an audience member, it's hard for me to say I like that. But I also, as an audience member, am acknowledging that that may have been the absolute best that they could have done, given the amount of material that needed to be covered. And because it's such a well-known, iconic story, you don't want to leave any of that out. So they had to hit all these points, but then give each one of these points its due diligence because of its importance to the themes of the story and the overall arc of Odysseus and his crew. But then, the last third of the movie, I think things really, really got good. There is a final fight scene that I think is one of the best crafted action scenes I've ever seen. It is like a superhero fight scene done. It's a masterclass because there are so many planted payoffs, things that they set up at the beginning of the movie that come down at the very end, and they all converge in this nice way where you really, this room where they have this fight scene, you've been coming in and out with these various bits of the story that take place in that room, and then each one of those scenes has a little tidbit, a little planted payoff, and it all comes together in the last scene. And there's a really great device where weapons are being dropped through the floor, and as Odysseus is fighting a whole room of people, and weapons are being dropped down to the floor, and it's like this great little tension device where he's fighting, and none of them have any weapons, but oh no, now there's more weapons, and they're fighting, oh no, now there's more weapons, and building until this, our hero is being trapped, and the odds are growing and growing and growing. It just so well. It was very cold in the theater, but by the end I was like sweating in my seat because I was just so locked into this final fight scene. And I think Brad Pitt's performance was super stellar, especially at the end. There's this nice little monologue, this sort of this emotional point that builds to the movie that I think lands very beautifully. I found it very touching. It was one of those kind of like goosebumps, chills moment where you're seeing the emotional precipice of the movie build into this one thing. And again, you have this sort of like storyline of representation that you see throughout the movie, and then it pays off really nice in that moment. So this is a movie I have to give more thought to. I want to let it linger in my mind more. I'm a huge Nolan fan. I have not seen all of Christopher Nolan's movies, but of all the ones that I have seen, I think The Dark Knight's really hard to beat for me because The Dark Knight, in my mind, is one of the most untouchable films. It's just so well-rounded and so well done. But I have to think this one really, really competes with that. I think without my little editing note, which you might even argue isn't quite criticism, but more as a subjective taste, if it wasn't for that, this would be an easy 10 out of 10 for me. It would easily be Christopher Nolan's best film. I think, though, if I zoom out and look at the ambition of a really, really cinematic, dramatic piece like this, I think this is one of Christopher Nolan's, if not, I think it's going to be one of the best of his career. I think you'll remember this one and, The Dark Knight more than any of the others in my humble opinion. So really excited for this movie. I really think he's a phenomenal director. He just keeps building, he keeps growing his ambition. He keeps growing his sense of artistry, I think, too. And I think culturally, he as a director is getting more and more pull because he's just so seeing something like Oppenheimer and then a movie like this be so commercially successful really gives me hope to the future of big cinema still having a lot of artistic weight to it. And very exciting. Love the movie. The Odyssey, 9 out of 10. I mean, it's really 10 out of 10. I'm just going to go ahead and give it a 10 out of 10. So it's fun. It's long, though. It is long. It doesn't feel long. It doesn't feel long to me in the same way that Avatar feels long. All the Avatar's movies are good. I like them, but they feel long. This one, the beats hit just in the right place to keep you going. Right when you kind of feel that hour mark fatigue, the 2 hour And once you hit that 2 hour, in a lot of movies, you start to be like, all right, let's wrap it up. But it's timed nicely with the beats of the story that you're sort of locked back in. Like, okay, yeah, I do want to hang out for another hour to see how this all plays out. So, yeah, Odyssey, 10 out of 10, highly recommend.